few years ago, June of 2021 to be exact, I responded to discourse on TikTok over the refusal of heterosexual women to be in a relationship with a bisexual man, and the biphobia and homophobia rooted in such a refusal. Somehow, magically, the discourse has reappeared and has made its rounds on TikTok over the past few weeks. So here I am, yet again, to refute the same tired arguments from straight women trying to justify their blatant anti-queerness. Without any further ado, let's get into it. Now, just like last time, people are claiming that we're attempting to force straight women into dating bisexual men, and that we're simply attacking them for their preference. A couple things here. Firstly, though I'm uncertain why this needs to be explained to literally anybody, everyone using this term is conflating preferences with requirements, so let's establish the difference. A preference is simply a greater fondness for one thing over another, meaning there is one thing you tend to choose over the other, but you would still choose the other. A requirement is a necessary condition, meaning something has to meet this condition or you will not choose it under any circumstance. Let's take brunettes and blondes for example. Let's say that I like blondes more than I like brunettes, but I still like brunettes and would still choose them. This means that I prefer blondes. However, if I were to say I need to have a blonde, I could never choose a brunette and I do not like them. This means that my choice is conditional upon the person being blonde, making this a requirement. So, if you gravitate towards heterosexual men while not eliminating bisexual men from your dating pool entirely, that is a preference. Being attracted to heterosexual men and refusing to date any bi man ever is a requirement. And refusing to date bi men specifically because of their bisexuality is, you guessed it, biphobia. The second thing is that practically nobody is trying to force straight women into being attracted to or sleeping with bisexual men. Obviously, you have the right to be attracted to whomever you please, and we can't control what you do with your life. But the vast majority of these straight women either do not understand or realize that their talking points are biphobic and or homophobic, or they refuse to believe or admit it because they think they are incapable of holding implicit preconceived biases. And like many straight people, are less concerned with ever even attempting to do the introspective work to unpack and or unlearn those biases than they are with attempting to rationalize and justify them. That's not to say most of us don't possess implicit biases and that everyone should be perfect, and it doesn't mean you have to do something you genuinely do not want to do, but I wish you all would stop trying to find nonsense, arbitrary justifications for your bigotry and admit that you're biphobic. Just like last time, a major argument from these straight women is that they want to be sure that their partner is 100% theirs and that they don't want to compete with everyone. The idea that bisexual people are inherently more inclined to infidelity because they're attracted to more than one gender identity is a major error in logic based upon a harmful stereotype against bisexuality. Orientation establishes the gender that you are attracted to and nothing more. In no way does the amount of genders one is attracted to affect their likelihood of cheating. That's simply not how attraction works. If that were true, you would also need to view all women as competition when dating a straight man, in which case this would simply be the result of trust issues and or low self-esteem, both of which are also very much worth unpacking. Another argument I see from straight women is that they are attracted to masculine men, and that bisexual men are more likely to be feminine. Asserting that bisexual men are automatically inherently feminine because of their sexuality perpetuates the ongoing stigma that all queer men are inherently feminine, which is obviously blatantly wrong, as there are in fact men who are gay and bi who are masculine, but also implies that femininity in men is inherently wrong, and that a man simply being bisexual or queer in any capacity for that matter delegitimizes their masculinity. Now, a genuine preference for and or attraction to men who are masculine is completely acceptable, but there's a fine line between attraction to masculinity and emasculating and dehumanizing men who are feminine or happen to be more in touch with their feminine side. I've also seen many comments saying things along the lines of, why can't heterosexual people want to date other heterosexual people and there's no other reason behind it? Why can't that be the reason and be left alone? And the simple answer to this is our attractions, preferences, and requirements do not simply exist in a vacuum. In fact, most, if not all of our requirements for something X and therefore exclusion of another Y are based on some factor that causes some sort of distaste for or aversion to Y. If someone asks you, why don't you want to date bisexual men? Simply stating, I just want to date other straight men is an illegitimate response. It doesn't establish or clarify why one chooses to actively, consciously avoid bi men and only date straight men. And it's likely a cowardly response used in an attempt to save oneself from having to confront their deep-seated biases. And even if this was a legitimate response, most of the arguments from straight women I've seen in this discourse have been anti-queer. So what now? This next argument might be the silliest of all of them, but I just had to include it. I saw a comment that says there are gay men who don't want women or aren't attracted to straight women. Is that heterophobic? So at least for the next minute, let's go ahead and turn on our brains and try to understand the difference between non-alignment of sexualities and exclusion. Let's take a straight man who is attracted to strictly women and a gay man who is attracted to strictly men. They physically cannot be in a relationship because their sexualities do not align. The straight man is not excluding him because of his beliefs about gay people or men. It is simply because his sexuality, which is unalterable, makes it impossible for him to be attracted to men. Now, let's take a straight woman who is attracted to strictly men and a bisexual man who is attracted to both men and women. Both of their sexualities align, so the only thing stopping them from being attracted to or in a relationship with each other is their beliefs about one another. If this woman says, "I cannot be in a relationship with you because you are bisexual," that is due to a voluntary exclusion of bisexual people, not some uncontrollable internal factor that makes it physically impossible for her to be attracted to him. Now, if a bisexual man were not attracted to straight women, yes, this would also be due to a bias, but I would argue that in some cases, this bias is likely to be a result of biphobic and anti-queer rhetoric perpetuated by straight women, some of the same rhetoric that is being amplified on TikTok at the moment. This is very similar to people who are T for T. By that, I mean trans people who prefer to date or only date other trans people. This can be from a bias, but in many cases, that bias is a result of having been harmed and or invalidated by cisgender people who have just learned that they're trans, or a fear of such harm and invalidation. Many straight women are also just stating that simply the idea of a bisexual man being attracted to men turns them off and even repulses them. Not only is this obviously the result of homophobia, as it shows prejudice against all men who are attracted to other men, but it also can be biphobic due to the alarmingly popular belief that bisexual men are just gay, which is blatantly wrong for reasons so unbelievably obvious that I don't even need to state them. How unbelievable is it that some straight women accept and even glorify straight women who kiss other women in public while in a relationship with a man, and are okay with women who are openly bisexual but completely reject bisexual men simply because they find men attractive as well? I specifically want to point out a video from this creator on TikTok.
I wanted to address my video on DL men. I want to know, what about that video gives off homophobic? Why? Because we don't want the men that we be with straight women. We don't want our men to like other men. So you telling me that I have to accept that? Being with a down low gay or bisexual man? No, I don't have to deal with that. No, I don't. I like my men who like.
So first things first, again, I'm not going to go on the internet and pretend that I have never had implicit biases, but it is genuinely insane how people are so comfortable with their implicit biases that they can film themselves saying things like this out loud, and then in the same breath claim to not understand how their values might be linked to homophobia in any capacity. Like, are y'all genuinely that disconnected from reality? Obviously, if men are dating women when they are gay, as in only into other men, I can understand why you wouldn't want to be in that situation. But if you are in a relationship with a bisexual man who is attracted to women in addition to other men, how does that man's attraction to other men negatively impact you or the relationship? Please, truly ask yourself why you think your man cheating on you with another man is any worse than cheating on you with another woman. Ask yourself why the thought of your man being attracted to another man repulses you so much. And by the way, if you said anything about diseases, that absolutely tells me everything I need to know. You stated, "I like my men who like," and believe it or not, and this might come as a shock to you, bisexual men do like. You cannot possibly believe that because bi men are into men, they are only interested in sodomy.
No, I don't want to be with men who like other men. And y'all are not going to make me feel bad about that. That does not make me homophobic. I love everybody for who they are. That's cool. That's on you. Whatever you want to do with your life, that's on you. But at least be honest about it. At least be upfront about it, so I can make the decision if I want to fuck with you or not.
You state that you can't be homophobic because you love everyone for who they are, and whatever you want to do with your life, that's cool. And what's alarming about this is that it truly illustrates how surface level some heterosexual people view homophobia, especially women of color who experience racism, sexism, misogyny, and misogynoir. I'm sure you're perfectly content with having convinced yourself that you can't possibly be homophobic because you're cool with queer people being queer, but the reality is that you cannot claim to accept everyone for who they they are, while simultaneously saying you don't want the men you date to simply be bisexual, especially by implying that they only like butt stuff. You essentially said, I'm fine with men being bi, just as long as they don't come around me or try to be in my dating life, which is blatantly homophobic rhetoric resulting from a deep-seated preconceived bias. It's almost like homophobia goes deeper than actively and verbally hating on queer people for existing. What really did it for me though was this follow-up video she made almost a week later.
My sister, she's lesbian. There's no time in her life that I remember that she liked boys. I asked her last night, would you be with a girl who's bisexual or has been with other men? She said, hell no. She actually said that she would be disgusted. She was repulsed by the thought of her girlfriend liking other men. She was repulsed. So I guess, what does that make her? I don't know, since they putting labels on us that we this, that we that, What is she? Is she, does she have a heterophobia?
At this point, I'm actually impressed by how much she has managed to dance around the argument. She feels so affirmed in her blatantly bigoted values that she turned to her lesbian sister to reinforce those values, got back on the internet, and said all of this as if she actually made a point. As if it is not literally the exact same situation, just with someone who is lesbian. Like, it's still blatant biphobia. You didn't trap anybody in some kind of gotcha moment, although I'm sure you believe you did. You just tried to reinforce your anti-queer biases by using a queer person to amplify them, as if your association with somebody in the community which is being criticized, or simply their membership of that community, makes your argument any more or less valid. This is the last argument I'm gonna point out. Somebody comments, genuine question, if all the straight people say, hey, I'm biphobic, what happens after that? What's the next move? And I just want to say, it is my biggest pet peeve when people in an argument begin a sentence with a genuine question and then proceed to ask a question that's clearly a disingenuous, bad faith question that is framed to essentially trap their opponent in a gotcha, especially when the answer is obvious. Let's pretend that all heterosexual women who refuse to date bisexual men came together and admitted that they are biphobic, which would most likely never happen, by the way. At that point, those who are genuinely interested in unlearning their biases which bring misfortune upon bisexual men, bisexual people, and the queer community at large will. Time and time again, I've seen so many people on the internet try to condescendingly explain to marginalized groups that there is no surefire way to put an end to bigotry and oppressive systems, and the problem with this is that we already understand that. But if we simply allow people to continue to amplify bigoted rhetoric based on their closed-minded, preconceived biases about queer people, we simply will not get any closer to dismantling anti-queerness. If we can get more people to identify their biases against bisexual men and learn to correct them, if we can accomplish that, not only will less people be outspoken about their bigotry, but less bisexual men will feel that they have to force themselves to stay in the closet due to an intolerant belief system that goes against them being who they are. Overall, at the end of the day, I am just so incredibly tired of straight women who seem to want to be able to freely and safely interact with their anti-queerness without being labeled as such or confronting their biases. And I'm also alarmed by how many people in marginalized groups, some of which are the same that is being affected by this discourse, are allowing them and even encouraging them to do so. Other queer people are going on the internet and defending these straight women with their lives, swearing up and down that the narratives they're pushing are not bigoted in any capacity. Genuinely, what do any of you gain from serving as a detriment to your own community and causing bisexual men to develop further insecurity regarding their sexuality? Thank you all sincerely for watching, and have the day you deserve.